Shir is dedicated to Nishmas Rochelei Bas Rav Chaim Tzvi. In the last few shiurim, we've been discussing the Hilchot D'Rabbanan of Shehiya and the Hilchot D'Rabbanan of Chazara. In the last shiur, we started to introduce the basic principles of Chazara. What I want to do today is really divide the shiur into two parts. The first part, we'll go ahead and look at a little bit of lumdus in a comparative analysis of both Shehiya and Chazara. That'll take us about the first 20 or so minutes of the shiur, and then we'll go through once again, very briefly, quickly actually, the T'na'ei Chazara, the 5 requirements of Chazara in order for Chazara to be mutter, and then we'll start to go through the practical examples with the Mitzvah Hashem next week, really resolving all of the issues Be'ez Hashem. Okay, so we saw there's an issur of Shehiya. Shehiya means you're not allowed to go ahead and put food on a fire that is not cooked from before Shabbos, that it should be cooked, so it come to be cooked on Shabbos, and there's a cure to that problem. The cure to that problem is, the Mishnah tells us in Masechah Shabbos in the beginning of the third parak, to use a blech, to have garof or katum, and that can cure the problem of Shehiya. In addition, we saw in the last year that there is an issur of Chazara. There is an issur of Chazara that you're not allowed to take food even if it's fully been cooked. So on a doraisa level, to return it to the fire would not be prohibited because ein bishul achar bishul, and you're still not allowed to return it to the fire because it looks like cooking. We saw 2 reasons in Rishonim why there is a problem in issur of Chazara. One reason is because of mechzik mevashel. It looks like cooking. When you cook, you take raw food and put it on a flame. So Chazara looks very similar. You're taking food, putting it on a flame. The only difference is this is not raw food, it's cooked food, but mid'Rabbanan, Chazal where it goes there, and issur of Chazara, mechzik mevashel. It looks like bishul. And since it looks like bishul, it's going to be prohibited. That was one reason cited by the Rishonim. And then a second reason, these Mar Makomos, there's a Rashi, Daf Lamed Vav Med Beis. Rashi says, that mechzik mevashel, the Ran, and Daf Tes Vav Med Aleph, and the Daf Harif echoes this as well. However, Tosfos and others indicate that the problem is not one of mechzik mevashel. That's not the issue. The issue is shema yachat tebegecholim. Just like by Shehiya, we saw you can't put food on a fire to become cooked on Shabbos lest it not be cooking fast enough, and you want to make sure it's going to be ready for your Friday night meal, so you start to stoke the coals. So we're worried you stoke the coals, you'll violate Mitzvah Havara. Similarly, so too when it comes to Chazara, if you put a food on the fire, back on the fire, it's fully cooked. So we're not worried about bishul, but we're worried you might come to, it's not warming up fast enough, you might come to stoke the coals. Shema yachat begecholim. So when it comes to Shehiya, the reason for the issur is a gzera, shema yachat begecholim. When it comes to Chazara, we see that Rishonim have 2 alternatives of what the nature of the issur Chazara is. One possibility is that the reason for the issur of Chazara is mechzik mevashel, is what we saw in Rashi, Daf Lamed Vav Lamed Beis, mechzik mevashel. And the other reason, the Sefer HaYashar tells us that it's asur because of Shema Yachat Begecholim. Is there any significance to that? Any difference, whether it's because you might come to stoke the coals or the problem of mechzik mevashel? So there's a very interesting idea that is developed by Rav Shechter in his Sefer Eretz HaTzvi, and he elaborates on the concept that when it comes to Isurei D'Rabbanan, especially in Hilchot Shabbat, when it comes to Isurei D'Rabbanan, so not all Isurei D'Rabbanan are created equal. We have different types of Isurei D'Rabbanan. Sometimes you'll have an Issur D'Rabbanan, we classically refer to as an Issur D'Rabbanan of a Gzera Shema Yava. You can't do X because you might come to do Y. X will lead you to perhaps engage in activity Y. That's one type of Issur D'Rabbanan, a Gzera Shema Yava. Sometimes you have an Issur D'Rabbanan that is not a Gzera. It's not also because of a Gzera, this will lead to that, but rather it's an Issur D'Rabbanan because it is Domeh L'Malacha. It looks exactly like the Issur D'Oraisa. The Issur D'Oraisa is X, and a facsimile thereof is this other activity, and Chazal asked it not because it will come to do the Issur D'Oraisa, but because the activity that you're involved in is Domeh L'Malacha. It looks exactly like the Issur D'Oraisa. For example, if you take a look at the Rambam in Hilchot Shabbat Perchav Aleph Halacha Aleph, the Rambam tells us Dvarim harbe hein she'asru chachamim mishum shvus. There are many different kinds of Isurei D'Rabbanan that the rabbis enacted when it comes to Hilchot Shabbos. Mehen dvarim asur b'nei shem domin l'malachos. Among them are activities that are asur because they are domeh l'malacha, very similar to the malacha. That's what we will call heretofore a Melachot D'Rabbanan. Umehen dvar masurim gzera shema yava mehen iser skila. There's another class of isurim that is aser because gzera shema yava. You might come to violate. If you do X, you might come to violate Y, which is nisur doraisa. It doesn't resemble, the gzera doesn't resemble the isur doraisa, but one might lead to the other. Two separate forms of Isurei D'Rabbanan. So, for example, you're not allowed to on Shabbos ride a horse. Why can't you ride a horse on Shabbos? So the Gemara tells us you can't ride a horse. Shema, you might come to break a zmora. You might come to break a branch. So therefore, since you're in an elevated perch, you might come to be near trees and break a branch. That's why you're not allowed to ride a horse on Shabbos. Now, does riding a horse resemble the malacha of kotzer? Harvesting? In no sense